Welcome to English Speak Pulse. I'm Danielle, and let me ask you a question almost every English learner asks at some point. How much time does it actually take to become fluent in English? 3 months? 6 months? 1 year? Or is it something that just never happens? If you've ever felt confused, frustrated, or even discouraged, because you've been learning English for years, but still don't feel fluent, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not slow. And joining me today is my co-host, Sarah.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm Sarah, and here's the truth most learners never hear. Fluency does not arrive on a calendar date. There is no morning where you wake up and suddenly say, "Today I'm fluent." Fluency builds quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. And that's why so many people feel stuck. They're looking for a finish line that doesn't exist.
In this episode, we're not giving you false promises or unrealistic timelines. We're talking about real time, how long fluency actually takes, what changes in your English at different stages, and why some people improve faster than others, even with the same amount of study.
We'll also break a few myths. Why studying for years doesn't always lead to fluency. Why short daily habits matter more than long study sessions. And how to measure your progress without comparing yourself to anyone else.
If you've ever thought, am I too slow? Am I doing something wrong? Will I ever be fluent? This episode is for you.
Because today, we're not answering how fast you can learn English. We're answering how to learn it the right way without losing hope. This is English Speak Pulse, where progress is real, timelines are honest, and fluency is finally understood.
Okay, let's dive into a topic that, honestly, quietly damages millions of people trying to learn a new language, especially English. And it's this idea that fluency is a moment.
Yes.
You know the feeling. We've all felt it. You're waiting for the day when a switch just flips or you cross some kind of finish line, when the calendar hits that magical date and boom, suddenly you're fluent.
Right. And that belief, well, it's toxic. When you structure your entire journey around that idea that fluency is a fixed date, every single day before that day just feels like a disappointment.
Or even a failure.
Or a failure, exactly. It creates this unnecessary paralyzing pressure.
That pressure is exactly why the most common question we see in our sources is how long will it take? But the research shows people aren't really asking that out of simple curiosity.
Yeah, not at all.
They ask because they are profoundly tired.
They are exhausted, yes. They're tired of studying, tired of the practice, and tired of not seeing clear results that match up with, their expectations. The real question they're wrestling with isn't about time. It's much more personal.
It's really, when will I finally stop feeling behind?
Exactly. When do I stop feeling like I'm not good enough yet?
And that's such a vital distinction, because that feeling of being behind, it isn't about the language itself, is it? Or even your skill.
No. That sensation comes purely from the gap between the speed you expected to learn and the reality of how it's actually going. It's an expectation problem, not a language problem.
So our mission today is to anchor this first truth about fluency, that it is not a destination, and to give you a completely new framework for measuring your progress, one that focuses on what you do every day, not some distant date.
We really have to dismantle this idea of this sudden arrival. And the biggest hurdle for most people is what we call the comparison trap.
Oh, absolutely. The comparison trap is deadly in language learning. You see someone on social media speaking so confidently, and your immediate thought is, they learned English in 6 months, what am I doing wrong?
But you're only seeing the final outcome. You're looking at their epilogue while you're still struggling through, chapter 3.
Yep.
You're ignoring their daily habits, the sheer volume of exposure they had, the environment they were in, and most importantly, all the mistakes they made along the way that you just never saw.
I love the analogy from the sources that you only see the finished sculpture. You don't see the thousands of tiny chips of marble that the artist had to painstakingly remove over time.
And this leads us to that crucial, gentle truth. Fluency does not arrive suddenly. It doesn't come like a lightning bolt. It grows gradually. It's almost a stealthy process.
Icky.
Very sneaky. In fact, most people only notice they've become more fluent when they look back, maybe over 6 months or when someone else points it out.
Fluency sneaks in quietly. I love that phrase because it just breaks the expectation of some big, noisy celebration. It means if you're waiting for that loud, "I've arrived" moment, you're going to miss the thousands of small moments where the real acquisition is happening.
Which is exactly why setting rigid timelines for fluency is almost guaranteed to fail. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment because you're assuming growth is linear.
Okay, let's dig into that. Why does the brain resist a straight line when it comes to language?
Because a timeline assumes, a predictable path. If you put in X hours this week, you move from level A to level B. But the brain isn't a spreadsheet, especially when it's forming these incredibly complex language patterns.
Wow.
It just resists that neat chronological approach.
So this is where the concept of learning in waves comes in. You might have a few weeks where you feel incredibly slow, like you're stuck or even going backwards. Then suddenly something just clicks.
And that click is the output of weeks of unconscious processing. Your brain uses that perceived downtime to consolidate patterns. That click isn't because you worked harder that morning. It's the moment when all that scattered input you've been getting finally organizes itself into something you can actually use.
That's fascinating. So the slow period isn't a failure. It's essential consolidation time. But for the learner, this means you have to distinguish between two very different activities: studying English versus acquiring English.
This separation is foundational. Studying English feels productive. It feels controlled and, measurable. You sit down with a textbook, you drill verb conjugations.
You check off the boxes.
You feel like you made tangible progress.
But acquiring English,
Yeah.
that feels messy. It feels slow and uncertain and often pretty uncomfortable.
Yes. Acquiring is when you're listening to a fast-paced conversation, and maybe you miss 30% of the words, but you're still fighting to get the main idea. Or you're on a work call and you just have to get your point across, even if it's clumsy.
Okay, so here's the core insight then.
This is it. Fluency comes predominantly from acquisition, not just study. Study gives you the rules, the components. Acquisition gives you the speed and the flow.
So study is the what, acquisition is the how.
A great way to put it. And acquisition happens when you just hear the language a lot, use it in real situations, and this is critical. You stop monitoring every single word and just focus on the meaning. Acquisition just ignores calendars. It doesn't care about your timeline.
Okay, let's move on to what might be the most counterintuitive part of this, and the thing that causes so much frustration. The paradoxes of improvement. I hear this all the time. I know I'm putting in more hours, but I feel like I'm actually getting worse.
It's the absolute #1 killer of confidence for intermediate learners, but there's a really clear psychological reason for it. Your awareness improves significantly faster than your skill.
Wait, say that again.
Your awareness of the language, your ability to notice things, improves faster than your ability to actually produce the language perfectly.
So the reason I feel like I'm stagnating and spotting more of my own errors is actually a sign that I'm growing.
Precisely. Think of it like a sound mixer. When you start, all the volumes are low, the sound is kind of mushy, and you barely notice the errors because your internal language monitor is weak.
Okay.
As you improve, your internal ear becomes much more refined. You didn't just learn how to speak better, you learned how to listen better, especially to yourself.
So now I hear that slight mispronunciation, or the awkward adjective, where 6 months ago, my brain would have just gone, "Great, I communicated."
Exactly. You're holding yourself to a new, higher standard, which is proof of growth. Improvement feels like stagnation because your awareness is just highlighting how far you still have to go.
Yeah.
But that discomfort, it's a good sign. It's normal.
That reframing is essential. You're not stuck. You're just more aware of the path ahead. And part of that is breaking what the sources call the fluency illusion. What's that?
That illusion is the popular myth that a fluent speaker never hesitates, never searches for a word, and never ever makes a mistake.
The mythical perfect speaker.
Right. This person who only exists in promotional videos, it creates an impossible target.
I think we all have that image in our heads, right? The polyglot who just glides seamlessly between thoughts.
And that image is so detrimental. Real fluency, it's not defined by the absence of errors. It's defined by your ability to continue, to recover from a mistake quickly, and to get your ideas across.
Even with pauses.
Even with pauses, even if you're searching for a word, and yes, even with mistakes, the goal isn't perfect performance. It's communicative resilience.
So let's pivot that into daily action. If fluency isn't about talent or speed or hitting some date, what are the true building blocks?
This is where we shift the focus entirely. The sources define 4 pillars that fluency grows from, and they are frequency, comfort, exposure, and continuation.
Okay, so frequency, how often you use the language, even for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Comfort, being willing to sound less than perfect.
Exposure, that's the volume of natural, authentic language you hear. And continuation, that's the ability to just keep going, to push through an awkward moment instead of shutting down.
And what's key here is that these pillars are built through time spent using English, not time spent thinking about English.
Exactly. It's the active application, which brings us back to the danger of timelines and comparisons.
Because it ignores all the individual factors.
It ignores everything that's unique to you. Your starting point, your exposure level, your confidence, your personal fear of making mistakes. These things wildly affect your progress.
And when you compare, you create pressure.
Immense pressure. And the research is clear. Pressure slows learning. Your brain is so busy worrying about failing that it can't get into that natural flow-based acquisition state.
So we need a new metric. Instead of asking that anxiety-inducing question, how long will it take, we need to replace it.
Replace it with a daily, sustainable, and frankly, more empowering question. What can I do today to move forward?
That simple reframe shifts the focus entirely from a fixed endpoint to the daily process. You control your habits today. You don't control the calendar.
And progress responds to habits, not hope. The small, consistent daily actions, they compound, and they naturally shrink your timeline without you ever having to obsess over the date.
So to recap our central finding here, if fluency were just a date you arrived at, most people would quit. The whole journey would feel like one massive failure.
But when you truly understand it's a process, a dynamic process, everything changes. Every day of practice counts. Every awkward conversation has value. Nothing is wasted.
And if you take one single truth from this discussion, let it be this. Fluency is not something you arrive at, it's something you grow into.
And growth takes time, yes, but it also gives you results along the way. Little wins, small bursts of capability you didn't have before. You gain functional fluency long before you ever get close to perfection.
So as you go about your week, think about that stagnation paradox. If you are noticing more of your own mistakes now than you did 6 months ago, if you're catching those little grammar errors or awkward phrases, don't let that become proof of failure. Challenge yourself to embrace that discomfort. Recognize it for what it is. That awareness is concrete proof that your internal measuring system has improved. That's not a sign of being stuck. That is the quietest, clearest evidence of growth you could possibly ask for.
There's this moment, I think every single language learner has it, right? It doesn't matter what language you're learning. You see a colleague maybe just effortlessly handling a meeting in English, or you see someone online and they're talking about deep topics and claim they only started, 6 months ago.
And that little voice kicks in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That voice of self-doubt just whispers something really damaging. It says, why is it taking me so long? And that's when you ask it, the dangerous question, am I slow?
And we need to grab that question right now and throw it out.
Just get rid of it.
Completely. Because it's based on a massive, just a really damaging misconception. Speed in getting fluent, I don't care if it's English, Spanish, Japanese, it is not about intelligence. It's not about some innate talent or just pure luck. It truly isn't.
So, okay, if it's not a talent issue, then what is it? Because, we all see these people who seem to learn so fast. And for the huge majority of us who are just plugging away every day, it's just, it's demoralizing.
It is.
So that's our deep dive mission today. We want to be really precise about this. We are going to unpack the pure mechanics, the things behind that accelerated fluency. We want to strip away that myth of talent and show you exactly how the brain gets up to speed. And, maybe more importantly, expose the biggest mental block, the real-time thief that keeps so many motivated learners just stuck.
And what's so fascinating here, when you look at the data, is that the answer is all about process optimization. It's just about how your brain is being used, not about how smart that brain is to begin with.
It's the user manual.
We're basically giving you the user manual for acceleration.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with what you identified as the biggest myth, the one that I think derails people before they even get a real chance. And that's this idea, this pervasive idea that some people are just naturally good at languages.
You hear it constantly.
All the time. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? People think, well, I guess I just don't have that gene, so why should I even bother trying to go fast?
It's the perfect cognitive excuse.
Yeah.
It really is. It gives you an easy way out when things get hard. But when we actually look closely at what we're calling natural ability, it almost always just boils down to two really simple, non-magical things.
Okay.
It's either significant early exposure to the language, or it's a very low fear level when it comes to making mistakes.
Yeah.
It's not in any measurable way connected to some kind of superior linguistic intelligence.
That's a huge reframe. And it's so important for you listening to really absorb that. If someone, say, grew up playing video games in English and watching movies, even if they never formally opened a grammar book,
Right.
they've already built these essential neurological pathways, these comfort levels that someone starting from absolute zero just doesn't have. So they're not talented, they're just experienced.
They're experienced, exactly. But let's look at a different kind of trap. This is one that often catches the most intelligent people. We call it the intelligence trap. It's a dynamic we see over and over, especially with high-achieving students, and the sources are really clear on why it's so insidious.
And this brings up that critical question we see everywhere. Why is it that some of the most genuinely fluent, spontaneous English speakers were, maybe average students or even poor students in school?
Yeah.
While at the same time, some of the very best students, the ones who aced every vocab quiz, every grammar test, they completely freeze up when they have to have a simple, real-world conversation.
It's the A student paralysis. We see it all the time. They know every single rule perfectly, but you put them in front of a native speaker, and they can't even fluently order a coffee or ask for directions. They're brilliant, but they're silent.
So why? Why does being highly intelligent actually seem to become a barrier here?
The source material is very clear on this. There's a neurological distinction. School tests and that kind of traditional learning, they reward analysis.
Yes.
Right. That's the conscious, highly active, effortful part of your brain. And that system is amazing for, say, solving a complex math problem or dissecting a piece of text. But fluency rewards release.
What do you mean by release?
Release is the ability to just bypass that conscious analysis system. It's about accessing language automatically, the way you speak your native language.
Oh, I see.
Think about learning to drive a car. In the beginning, you're consciously analyzing every single action. Okay, clutch in, now shift the gear, check the mirrors. That's analysis.
Right, it's a checklist.
It's a checklist, but true. Fluent driving is release. You just do it.
Yeah.
Your body and your brain are on muscle memory, not active calculation. When that A student tries to speak, they stop the release process to analyze, wait, am I using the correct tense here? Is that the right preposition? And that delay. That's what destroys the flow.
So the brain's analytical speed is actually working against its communicative speed.
That's fascinating. So if fluency is about use and release, not analysis, we have to look at the factors that actually drive that release system. What are the real factors? The actionable things that decide how fast someone gets to that automatic point.
Okay, so we've isolated this down to 4 crucial factors. These 4 are the inputs that consistently, time and again, predict who's going to accelerate their timeline.
All right, let's start with the one that kind of sets the stage for everything else. Factor 1.
Factor 1 is simply the sheer amount of real exposure. And we have to contrast 2 very different types of learners here. There's the learner who lives with English, and then there's the learner who only touches English.
Can you define living with English? I mean, something that goes beyond just watching a movie once a week.
Absolutely. Living with English means your daily environment is saturated with it, almost to the point where it's a bit annoying.
Yeah.
It means you change the language setting on your phone, on your browser, on your computer's operating system. It means you are actively seeking out English media. You're internalizing conversations. You have the language just constantly running in the background. You're not just consuming it, you're existing within it.
Whereas touching English is.
If you only touch English, you only encounter it during that 60-minute block you scheduled for studying. And the key insight here is that real-world exposure, it acts as a constant multiplier of speed. It forces the brain to recognize patterns outside of a textbook, and that accelerates the whole adaptation process exponentially.
That's the difference right there. You're either using the language to live your life, or you're just scheduling time to study a subject. Okay, factor 2. This one is purely mental, And it's maybe the one that prevents release the most. Fear level while speaking.
It is the ultimate internal bottleneck. I mean, just think about this scenario. We see it all the time. You have two learners, both highly dedicated, and technically they know the same amount of English vocabulary and grammar. One of them speaks every single day to their friend, to their mirror, into their phone's voice memos. They make mistakes constantly. They trip over words, but they always get their message across.
And the other one?
The other one stays completely silent. They're terrified of being judged. They're waiting until they feel like they've mastered 95% of the grammar.
The silent learner is stuck in that analysis paralysis we talked about, waiting for this mythical sense of perfection to arrive before they'll actually engage.
Exactly. And that silence.
Yeah.
That's where the clock stops. Fluency grows from use. It doesn't grow from accuracy. And fear is the great time delay mechanism. So the problem with the silent learner isn't that they don't have the knowledge. It's that they don't have the courage to fail a little bit every day. Every moment a learner stays silent, worrying about sounding imperfect or making some small error. That is time being stolen directly from their fluency timeline.
Okay, but I can hear the listener now saying, but wait, if I speak every day with mistakes, won't I just be reinforcing bad habits? Is there a danger there? Focusing too much on just use over accuracy in those early stages.
That's a really common concern, and it's a valid one. But you have to think about it in two stages. Stage one is building the channel. The confidence and the physical habit of just speaking without analysis. Stage two is refining the channel. If you try to refine the channel before you've even built it, you'll never get started. You have to prioritize building fluency through use first. You can refine the details later.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so this is where the mental state connects to the actual action. Factor 3, speaking frequency. Repetition. What's the successful pattern we see among all the fast learners?
The successful pattern is so simple, and it follows the rule of compounding interest. It's speaking every single day, even in tiny amounts, maybe just 3 to 5 minutes. And crucially, doing it without overwhelming pressure.
And you contrast that with
the learner who speaks very rarely, maybe only when they're forced to in some high-stakes classroom situation, or only when they decide they finally feel ready for, a 2-hour conversation.
It's the difference between doing daily maintenance versus a rare, grueling workout.
Exactly. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. It learns through low-stakes repetition, which builds automaticity, that beautiful release system we want. Frequent small-dose use is infinitely better than rare, large-dose effort. The small daily action builds the muscle memory.
So you're saying if I spoke English for just 10 minutes every day for a month,
you would advance much, much further than if you spent 5 hours speaking only once that entire month. Guaranteed.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered consistency, we've covered boldness. Let's look at the efficiency of the effort itself. Because factor 4 gets into this critical difference between actions that feel productive and actions that actually are productive. And that is habit quality.
This is so critical. So many learners spend hours studying, but they're just polishing the wrong tools. High-quality habits are all focused on active use.
What does that look like in practice?
It means things like practicing speaking, even if it's talking to yourself or a language partner. It means deliberately thinking in English while you're doing mundane tasks like washing the dishes, or engaging in active listening, where you're actually responding mentally, not just passively hearing background noise.
And the low-quality habits, the ones that feel comforting, they feel safe, but they don't build that release muscle, that's the trap.
That is the trap. Those are the habits of only studying dense grammar charts, or only reading a novel without ever trying to speak about it, or spending hours just memorizing isolated word lists with flashcards.
But those things feel like real work.
They do. And they're foundational, yes, but they build analysis. They don't build release. Fluency grows from habits of action, getting the language out of your head and into the world, not just from hoarding knowledge in books. If your daily habit doesn't involve some form of active real-time use, your progress will be dramatically slower.
So if we step back for a second, all 4 of these factors, exposure, low fear, frequency, and active habits, they all point away from talent, and they point directly toward consistent, intentional behavior.
Absolutely. The speed equation is a behavior equation.
Which leads us perfectly into the idea of the environment. I mean, we all know why people who move to an English-speaking country seem to speed up so fast. It's not magic. It's because they're forced to use the language. They just don't have a choice.
And that forced state, that's the key mechanic we need to simulate. When the brain has no other option but to use the language to survive, to get groceries, to interact with people, it stops retreating to the comfort of the native language.
It has to adapt.
It adapts so much faster because the penalty for not using English is immediate. It's pain or inconvenience.
That sounds great for someone who can actually move abroad, but what about the listener who's learning from home? You said there's good news here. This state of no choice can actually be manufactured.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
You have to create an internal environment of no choice through just absolute commitment. You make English the primary way you get entertainment, the way you learn new subjects, and, critically, for your internal monologue, your self-talk.
You could even set up English-only zones in your own house.
Exactly. Even if it's just the kitchen table during dinner. The key is to commit to a situation where falling back into your native language is actually inconvenient.
That's such an actionable idea. It changes the entire perspective from I will schedule time to study English to I will try to live my life in English. Okay, now let's circle back to that comparison habit because that's what starts this whole am I slow question. We need to expose why fast is so often just an illusion when we look at someone else.
Right. We constantly forget that people rarely start from a true absolute zero baseline. That person who seems to master the language in a year, they might have actually had a significant existing foundation already in place that maybe even they weren't consciously tracking.
What are some of those invisible foundations, the things that make a timeline look deceptively short?
Well, they might have had really high quality continuous English education earlier in life, say from age 5 to 18. Even if they felt they were terrible at it back then.
Mm-hmm.
They might have had intense exposure through international media since they were a kid. Or, and this is a big one, they might have this generalized confidence from mastering other complex skills. That makes them psychologically comfortable with the discomfort of being a beginner again.
So their timeline only looks short because the hard work of building that conceptual and psychological foundation was already done years ago.
Precisely. You're comparing your week 1 to their week 52. But really, they started at their week 30, when the ground was already soft.
That is a vital perspective. We're only seeing their acceleration phase, not their entire journey. Okay, let's talk about those invisible habits that actively steal time. The ones where the learner doesn't even realize they're self-sabotaging. The time thieves.
These are the protective habits. They feel responsible, but they are so destructive to speed and flow. The top 4 offenders are overthinking and translating everything in your head before you speak.
Guilty.
Constantly correcting every little error you make immediately. Waiting indefinitely to feel ready to use the language outside of a practice session. And of course, the big one, comparing your progress to others.
Why do we do those things? I mean, they sound exhausting, but they're so common. We feel like we have to be perfect before we step out.
That feeling comes from a place of self-protection. These habits are just attempts to avoid the emotional discomfort of being wrong or appearing clumsy or risking failure. But in avoiding that discomfort, you create this massive internal resistance.
And resistance slows you down.
It slows the learning loop down dramatically. Every time you do one of those things, you are stealing time that you could have spent just building muscle memory through simple, imperfect use.
So the core conflict is protection versus progress. What's the antidote to all this pressure and these invisible delays? You mentioned there's a central concept.
The central concept that overrides all of that resistance is this. Real progress comes from comfort, not pressure. Pressure makes people freeze. It triggers that analytical brain system we talked about earlier.
Right.
But comfort makes people relax. It makes them speak and engage. You need to engineer comfortable situations, find a trusted partner, speak to a mirror, record yourself, any situation where the penalty for making a mistake is 0.
And speaking in a comfortable, low-stakes environment is the only activity that really moves the clock forward on fluency speed.
That's right. Which brings us to a simplified speed equation for language fluency. If you want to accelerate time, you have to maximize these 3 interconnected variables: frequency plus comfort plus exposure, progress.
And it's a mathematical certainty then that if you remove or minimize any one of those 3, if you speak rarely or you feel constantly stressed and judged when you speak, or you only touch the language occasionally, the time it takes to get fluent automatically goes up.
It's a guaranteed outcome. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. It's just behavioral physics.
So let's bring this all back home one last time to the listener who feels like they're moving too slowly. If other people seem faster, what does that actually mean for them, specifically?
It definitely does not mean that you are slow or that you lack ability. It just means that something in your process, in one of those three variables of the speed equation needs a small adjustment.
A tweak.
A tweak. It requires shifting a habit, not replacing your entire intelligence or your level of effort.
So we need to swap out that dangerous question, am I slow, for a healthier, more productive comparison.
Yes, completely shifts your focus. Instead of comparing your speed to someone else's deceptive timeline, compare your consistency to your own past behavior. The question that truly predicts fluency better than any progress marker. It's simple, and it's daily. Did I use English today? Even for a moment.
That question puts the power right back into your own daily actions. It makes fluency about consistency, not about genius. And it shifts the measure of success from some vague external timeline to a concrete daily accomplishment.
Which brings us to the central truth we really want you to hold on to as you move forward. People don't become fluent faster because they are special. They become fluent faster because they either consciously or unconsciously use English differently. Change the behavior, maximize those three variables in the speed equation, and the speed will inevitably follow.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're wading into a topic that I think for a lot of people causes a ton of anxiety. We're talking about language fluency. You've brought in a pile of sources, linguistics reports, some psychological studies that really challenge what most of us think fluency even means.
Yeah, and that's the mission today. Because when you decide to learn a new language, you almost always have this internal picture of what fluent looks like.
Right.
And the data suggests that picture is not just wrong, it's actually slowing you down. It's harmful.
So the biggest barrier isn't grammar, it's not vocabulary. It's the definition of success you're holding in your head.
Exactly. It creates this engine of disappointment. It's why so many people quit, often right when they're hitting a huge milestone they should be celebrating.
Okay, so our goal here is to fix that misunderstanding right now, before we even get into timelines or anything else.
We have to. Because if your definition is wrong, the goal line just keeps moving every single time you get close. You can never win.
Okay, let's unpack this. What is that common, flawed image? When a learner says, I want to be fluent, what are they picturing?
They're picturing what some of our sources call the mythical linguistic Olympian. And it's built on 4 key ideas.
Okay.
1, they have to speak incredibly fast. 2, they never pause, they never hesitate. 3, and this is the big one, they never ever make mistakes.
Ever.
And 4, they have to sound exactly like a native speaker. Yeah. It's a checklist for absolute perfection.
And if perfection is the standard, I mean, the psychological cost has to be enormous. How does that play out with timelines?
It creates what one study calls the dangerous cycle. See, when you start out, your standard is simple, right? You just want to say a sentence.
Yeah, where is the bathroom?
Exactly, and you do it. But instead of celebrating, your internal standard immediately jumps higher. Now it's, oh, I mastered the present tense, but my subjunctive is terrible.
So the goal line just keeps shifting away from you the faster you run towards it.
Yeah.
Satisfaction just never arrives.
It is psychologically exhausting. You get so hyper-focused on the one mistake you made in a 5-minute chat that you completely ignore the fact that you just successfully, talked about your job for 5 minutes.
You always feel not fluent yet.
Always. Your own definition is sabotaging your sense of achievement. It just sucks the joy out of the whole process.
Okay, so we need to just dismantle that myth right now. Let's hold up a mirror to actual native speakers, the very people learners are trying to copy. Do they meet that 4-part standard?
Never. Not even close. I mean, think about your last complex conversation in your own native language.
Right.
You hesitate, you forget words, you start a sentence, realize it's not working, and you backtrack. You change it midway through.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
And we use filler words constantly.
Constantly. And we use really simple language when we just need to get a point across.
So if perfection were the actual definition, then literally no one would be fluent.
No one, including people who've spoken the language their whole lives.
Yeah. That
myth has to go. It basically says any sign of effort is a sign of failure.
Here's where it gets really interesting then. Let's switch perspective. If fluency is not perfection, what is it? What's the real functional definition we should be using?
This is what I love about these sources. The real definition is so practical and honestly forgiving. Real fluency is functional, not flawless.
Functional, not flawless. I like that.
It's just about effective communication.
Right.
It's not about how beautiful it sounds. The sources really boil it down to 4 main abilities.
Okay, what are they?
First, can you express your ideas clearly? Second, can you keep speaking without just stopping completely? Third, can you recover when you do get stuck? And finally, can you understand what the other person is saying and respond in a way that makes sense?
And notice what's not in that definition.
Exactly.
Nothing about speed, nothing about perfect grammar, nothing about never making a mistake. It sounds like it's less of a performance and more about just keeping the conversation going.
That's it. If you can keep the ball rolling, you are fluent enough for that situation. And to make this even more practical, the best insight here is breaking fluency down. It's not one single thing.
Right, there are levels.
There are 4 distinct types. And knowing this, it just changes everything. It gives you a real roadmap.
Okay, let's walk through these because this is where we get realistic timelines. Let's start with type 1, survival fluency. What does that look like?
This is your basic day-to-day transaction. It's the stuff you need to, well, survive. Ordering coffee, asking for directions, buying a train ticket.
Just simple, essential exchanges.
Exactly. It's the minimum you need to travel and handle your immediate needs without a panic.
And the timeline on that, what did the sources say?
With consistent daily practice, this level often takes about 2 to 4 months.
2 to 4 months.
Yeah, and by consistent, we mean you're actually using it every single day, even for just a little bit. And here's the key thing. A lot of learners get to this point. They are technically fluent at this survival level, but they don't see it.
Because they're still aiming for that mythical perfection.
They're aiming for type 4, so they just dismiss their own real progress.
Now, that timeline, 2 to 4 months, that's going to vary, right?
Yeah.
What if your native language is, say, Japanese, and you're learning Spanish? That's a huge leap.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are clear. These are averages. The time investment will be greater if the languages are very different, but the goal is the same. It's not about perfect grammar. It's about, did I successfully get my coffee?
Right. It's about the function. Okay, moving up the ladder. Tech 2, conversational fluency. This feels like where the fun starts.
This is the game changer. This is where language stops being just a tool and starts being, enjoyable. You can share opinions, tell a story about your weekend, talk about your day.
You can have a real back and forth.
A genuine exchange of ideas. And you start to pick up on the emotional tone. You get the jokes.
And the timeline for that is a bit longer, I'd imagine.
Yes. This one often takes about 6 to 9 months. And it really depends on how often you're speaking. But think about that moment. When you laugh at a joke in the moment, without having to translate it in your head first.
That's a huge milestone.
It's a massive shift. This is where real confidence starts to build.
And then for a lot of our listeners, the next step is crucial for their careers. Type 3, professional fluency. The stakes get higher here.
They get much higher. This is all about clarity and precision, usually under pressure. We're talking about work-related English.
So leading a meeting, a job interview.
A presentation, writing a professional email where the nuance really matters. You need specific vocabulary for your field, and you need to stay calm when people are asking you tough questions.
You can't be searching for a key term when you're trying to close a deal. How long does this usually take?
Generally, we're looking at 9 to 15 months of really focused practice. Often, that means mixing general language learning with specific job training. But the payoff is so direct, it can literally change your career path.
Okay, and that brings us to the final level. The one that causes all the trouble because people aim for it from day one. Type 4, near native comfort.
This is the peak of the mountain. It's where the language just feels transparent. You're not thinking about it anymore. You're using advanced humor. You're expressing really complex emotions without effort.
You know, the deep cultural references.
You react at high speed without any conscious thought of translation. It just flows.
And the sources are very clear. This is a long, long road.
It is. This level can take years, multiple years. And it often requires living in the country, total immersion. But, and this is the most important takeaway,
Yeah.
it is absolutely not required for success.
See that again?
It is not required for success. You can be a brilliant scientist, a successful CEO, a celebrated artist with solid type 2 or type 3 fluency. Knowing that type 4 is optional, it takes so much pressure off.
That breakdown is so helpful. It turns fluency from this one impossible switch into a ladder you can actually climb. But even while people are climbing, they run into these confusing feelings. Let's talk about some of those bad metrics people use. First up, inconsistency. Why do I feel fluent on Tuesday and then like a total beginner on Wednesday?
This is so common. It's because we think fluency should be this constant state, like a light switch that's always on.
But it's not.
It's not. Fluency is highly context dependent, and that's completely normal. Think of your brain like a computer. Simple, familiar tasks, Don't use much processing power.
So talking about my hobbies with a friend over coffee, that's low cognitive load.
Exactly. The vocabulary's right there. You're relaxed. You're probably operating at a solid type 2.
Right.
But then you walk into a meeting about quarterly financial projections, a topic you've never discussed in that language before.
Your cognitive load just skyrockets.
Through the roof. You're juggling new jargon, pressure, trying to form complex arguments. Struggling in that one specific high-pressure moment does not mean you lost the fluency you had with your friend.
It just means you haven't built fluency in that specific context yet.
Precisely. But that feeling of inconsistency sends people right back into that dangerous cycle, thinking they're failing.
Okay, that's a huge relief. Now, what about the first part of that myth we talked about? Speed. Everyone thinks talking fast means you're fluent.
It feels impressive, doesn't it? But the sources are explicit on this. Speed is a terrible metric for fluency.
Why do we chase it then? It sounds like confidence.
It can sound like it, but more often it's a sign of nervousness. The sources are so clear. Speed without clarity is not fluency. It's just noise. Real fluency is calm, clear speech, where your meaning is easy for the other person to understand. If you're rushing, you're probably making more mistakes and forcing your listener to work harder, which is the opposite of good communication.
And the last piece of the myth, the accent. I'm not really fluent until I sound American or British or whatever the goal is.
This is maybe the biggest distraction of all. Accent is not fluency, period.
It's just a feature of who you are.
It's a feature of your personal history, your identity. It is not a measure of your skill. Think of all the different accents among native English speakers around the world. They're all fluent. The only goal that matters is intelligibility.
Can people understand you?
That's it. Can people understand you without struggling? Your accent changes incredibly slowly over many, many years, if it ever changes at all. Your communication skills can improve dramatically in months. Don't confuse the two.
So if speed is a bad metric, accent is irrelevant, and inconsistency is normal.
Yeah.
How do you actually measure your progress? We need a tool that isn't just about how you feel.
Yes, we need to get out of our own heads. So you stop asking that big, vague question, am I fluent? It's useless. The sources recommend something they call the listener test.
Listener test, okay.
The better question to ask yourself is this. Do people understand me without effort?
Oh, that's so simple. And it's external. It's not about me. It's about my listener.
Exactly. It puts the focus where it belongs in communication, on the other person. If the answer is yes, if your listener isn't constantly asking you to repeat yourself, if they're not looking confused,
Then you are functionally fluent in that situation.
you've succeeded. If they are struggling, then you know you haven't hit functional fluency in that context yet.
So how can you? How can you actually use this test in the real world? Do you just ask people?
You absolutely should. Ask a trusted friend or colleague for honest feedback. Hey, did you follow that easily or was it a struggle? And you need to track this across different situations.
So maybe my coworkers understand my presentations just fine.
Right. So your professional fluency is strong,
But I'm a total mess trying to order a complicated meal at a restaurant.
which means your survival fluency in that specific area needs work. It gives you a clear map of your actual skills, not just a vague feeling of failure.
Okay, so let's tie this all back to the listener's journey. If you adopt this new definition functional, measured by the listener, what happens to the learning process itself?
The effect is just. It's profound. All that paralyzing pressure to be perfect, it just drops away. The fear of making a mistake, which is what makes people freeze up and not speak at all,
It's not as scary.
it's not. A mistake is no longer a sign of total failure. It's just a little breakdown in communication that you can repair and move on from.
And the irony, according to the sources, is that when that pressure drops, your learning actually speeds up.
Precisely. You're not afraid to practice. You're not stuck in your head analyzing your flaws. You're focused on the goal, being understood. By letting go of that impossible idea of type 4 perfection, you get to type 2 and type 3 so much faster.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
It means that success is not measured by how few mistakes you make. It's measured by how well you get your ideas across. It means you probably crossed a major fluency line months ago and you never even gave yourself credit.
That is the single truth to lock in today. Fluency is not a single far-off destination you might never reach.
It's a range of abilities, a ladder of skills that you are climbing one step at a time. And you get to decide which rung on that ladder is the right one for your life right now.
Fantastic. So if success doesn't require near-native comfort, if type 4 is optional, here's our final thought for you to take away. Which specific daily goal survival, conversational or professional, can you focus on for the next 6 months? Pick one. Define your success with the listener test, and just forget about being perfect. Focus on function, not being flawless, and just watch what happens.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are answering what is probably the universal learner question. The one that causes more frustration, more burnout than, well, pretty much any other. What does real progress actually look like over time?
It's the big one, and it's why so many people quit.
Exactly. So we've pulled together a lot of research articles, studies on cognition, learner data, all of it dissecting the milestones of getting fluent in English. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We wanted to take that invisible internal process of learning and, make it visible for you.
Because that feeling of putting in the work and seeing nothing change,
Yeah.
that's the killer.
People mistake consolidation for stalling.
They do. And that's really the heart of it. When we look at why learners just abandon their goals, it's almost never because the grammar was too hard. It's a failure of expectation management. They think progress should be this nice straight line going up, and when it isn't, they lose faith.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Before we talk about any timeline, we have to establish the one non-negotiable condition, because we're not talking about just letting time pass.
Precisely. This is the critical rule about time, and it has to come first. Time alone does not create fluency. It's the correct use of that time. So when we say 3 months or 6 or 12, we're assuming consistent active practice.
Active practice, what does that mean specifically?
It means daily speaking, putting yourself in situations where you have to use the language, and being okay with making mistakes, not just studying.
Right. Quality over just clocking hours. Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. Let's start with that first big hurdle, the first 3 months.
The first 90 days?
Anyone who's in that phase right now knows it's just this chaotic mix of, excitement and total paralysis. And our sources are completely unanimous on this. The first 3 months are not about fluency. They're about unlocking English.
Yes. It's the period where your brain just stops panicking every time you try to speak. The change here is fundamentally psychological. It's driven by this initial cognitive rewiring. Before this, your brain treats every single thing you say as a huge, complex translation problem.
Word by word, rule by rule.
Exactly. But by the 3-month mark, you start to see 4 critical shifts that show that panic response is fading. First, the fear gets better.
How so?
Well, you start recognizing chunks of language phrases, greetings, little connectors, so you're not building every single sentence from scratch anymore.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, those long, agonizing pauses, they get shorter, noticeably shorter. Your brain has started storing the most common words in a place it can get to them faster.
So it's like upgrading your brain's search engine. You're not rummaging through a dusty library anymore. You're searching an index.
That's a great analogy. It really is. The third change is just that word recall gets faster for those key words. And fourth, you start producing what we call simply sentence flow.
Simpler sentence flow.
You're not paralyzed trying to find the perfect conditional tense. You just communicate. Simply, but you get the message across.
But hold on, if you're 3 months in, you're probably thinking, okay, I can make simple sentences, but I sound like a child. Doesn't that mean I haven't really improved?
And that is the great paradox of this phase. You have absolutely made progress because you've gone from, zero communication to usable communication.
Affable, not perfect.
Usable, you can handle basic chats, say what you need, express a simple opinion. The frustration comes because your brain, your intellect, it still wants to express these big, complex thoughts.
And the language skill isn't there yet.
Not yet. So you feel every mistake, every missing word. But the real win is psychological. The anxiety is being replaced by the manageable effort of finding a word. That feeling of discomfort, it's proof you're on the right track. And that discomfort, it eventually gives way to a real sense of stability.
Right.
Which is exactly what we see happening as we get to the 6-month mark. If 3 months was about picking the lock, 6 months is about, installing permanent wiring. Confidence starts to solidify.
So we're moving past just basic survival English and into real conversation.
Yeah.
What are the signs you'd notice at this stage?
It's about cognitive efficiency. First, you see much longer speaking turns. You can actually hold the floor for a minute or two without
Running out of steam.
Right, without running out of steam or needing someone to rescue you. Listening comprehension gets way better, but the real game changer is you're doing far fewer mental translations.
You're thinking more in English.
Exactly. You're not filtering everything through your native language anymore, and that changes everything. Your tone becomes calmer, more relaxed. The language starts to feel familiar.
Less like a foreign puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your brain is practicing what's called automaticity. It's taking all those chunks it learned in the first 3 months and making them instant. No conscious effort required.
That 6-month timeline, though, it sounds pretty aggressive to some people. Our sources keep saying active practice. What if you feel like you're putting in the time, but you're still stuck?
That's a really important question, and the sources are clear. This is only achievable when your practice is output heavy.
Meaning you're speaking.
You're speaking, you're using it, you're not just consuming it. If you're stuck, it's usually because you're studying grammar about English instead of having a conversation in English. But if you're doing it right, by 6 months, you are holding real conversations, you're explaining ideas, and maybe most importantly, you're recovering gracefully from your mistakes.
Recovering gracefully, that's a huge psychological jump.
It is. It means a mistake isn't this catastrophic thing that shuts you down anymore. It's just a little stumble. And this brings us to a key aha moment. At 6 months, a lot of people are what the research calls functionally fluent.
We should probably define that term because functional fluency gets confused with native fluency all the time.
Right. Functional fluency just means you can navigate daily life. You can handle work, you can travel, you can socialize successfully. It's the difference between, say, driving a car to get groceries and being a professional race car driver.
You don't need a perfect lap time to get to the store.
Exactly. You just need to be effective and safe. The paradox here is that learners don't feel fluent because they're comparing themselves to a native speaker, a standard that takes years, not months.
So if you can communicate and get your needs met, you've actually achieved a huge goal.
You've achieved fluency, you just haven't achieved perfection. And that's okay.
Okay, so let's push forward. To the 1-year mark, we're still assuming that same dedicated, active practice. The sources describe this phase as English becoming fully integrated.
Yeah, integration is the final step in automation. At 12 months, the changes are less about speed and more about depth and comfort.
So what does that look like?
Your responses become more natural, almost instinctual, and you see these advanced capabilities start to emerge, like real emotional expression.
Not just stating facts.
Right. You can articulate feelings, nuance, subtlety, even humor.
Humor is a massive indicator. It requires such a deep cultural and linguistic understanding.
It absolutely is, and it shows you're comfortable under pressure, which is so important for professional life. That little editor inside your head, the one that used to check every single verb tense.
Yeah, that nagging voice.
It finally relaxes. It doesn't disappear, but it goes from being a constant critic to more of a quiet proofreader that only jumps in for big errors.
Which moves us right into what so many people are aiming for.
Yeah.
After a year of the right kind of practice, what can you actually do in a professional setting?
You should be able to work comfortably in English. You can handle high-stakes situations like a tough negotiation or a job interview, a detailed presentation.
You can also explain complex, abstract ideas, things that require more than just vocabulary. They need critical thinking.
Exactly. And beyond that, you start getting cultural fluency, understanding indirect communication, navigating unspoken office rules. This is the goal of integration. Not perfection, but professional ease, comfort.
And this is the point where people finally feel it.
This is when they take that deep breath and say, okay, I feel comfortable now. Even if small mistakes still happen, that confidence is the real prize. But before we wrap up the timeline, we have to talk about the reality of progress, because it's not a smooth ride.
Right. That roller coaster. The feeling of being great one day and then just terrible the next. It's so demoralizing if you don't know it's normal.
It is the process. The brain learns in jumps. You will hit these plateaus where it feels like nothing is changing for weeks.
And that's the consolidation period you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. That silence is consolidation, not failure. Your brain isn't busy learning new things. It's busy wiring up and cementing what it already has. It's moving that knowledge from conscious effort to automatic.
So if I'm a learner and I feel stuck, how do I know if I'm consolidating or if I'm genuinely stalling because of a bad habit?
You look at your behavior, it really boils down to that. If you are plateauing, meaning you're still using English every day, you're still out there making mistakes, you just have to keep going.
Trust the process.
But if you are truly stalling, it's not a talent issue, it's behavioral. And we see this huge contrast between the faster and slower improvers.
Okay, let's break down those behaviors. This is where the real fix is for anyone listening.
The faster improvers, they all share these traits. They speak daily. Practice is a habit, like brushing your teeth. It's not optional.
And the big one, mistakes.
They embrace mistakes. They don't wait for perfection. They see a mistake as free feedback, and they just move on. Their whole focus is on using English in real life.
Conversely, the slower improvers, they basically create the perfect environment for stagnation.
They do. They often prioritize studying grammar about the language instead of actually speaking the language. They practice irregularly, so the brain never gets a chance to automate anything.
And they avoid mistakes.
Which is the most destructive habit of all. By avoiding mistakes, you avoid speaking. You avoid the real-world pressure your brain needs to actually learn. And they tend to have these unrealistic expectations, which just leads to burnout.
That's such a clear distinction. So if you feel stuck, look at your behavior. Are you avoiding real-life use? The fix isn't a new textbook. It's changing how you interact with the language.
The emotional truth about time is maybe the biggest takeaway from all this. 3 months can feel like an eternity when you're in the middle of it, just waiting for fluency to show up.
But when you look back, those same months feel incredibly short. But you realize just how much changed quietly under the surface. You went from 0 to being able to communicate.
So we want to leave you with a different way to measure your success. A better way than just counting calendar months.
Okay.
Instead of counting months, count moments.
Moments.
Yeah. Think about just your last week. Can you find moments where you spoke without fear, or where you understood something naturally without having to translate it in your head?
Or moments where you expressed a complex idea even if the grammar wasn't perfect.
Yes. Those moments are the real signposts of progress. They are the proof that your brain is wiring things up, stabilizing, integrating. Those tiny victories are the only measure that really matters.
So the core truth to hold on to is this. If you are practicing correctly, actively, consistently, then time is absolutely on your side.
Fluency doesn't rush, but it never, ever stops growing. So think about which stage you're in right now and just focus on counting those moments of clarity.
Yeah.
You've got this.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are wrestling with something that I think causes just incredible frustration for millions of people. The language fluency gap.
Yeah.
You know, if you're one of the countless learners who has spent years, and we're talking about months, maybe even multiple years, in classes, reading books, consuming media, memorizing vocab.
Doing all the right things, you think?
Right. And then you feel completely paralyzed or, just incompetent when it's time to actually open your mouth and use the language. If that's you, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
It's such a common and, frankly, demoralizing situation. And what we find, based on material from sources like the Fluency Gap, is that the learner's default is always self-blame.
Always.
They just internalize it. They conclude, oh, I must be bad at languages, or I started too late, or the one that really crushes you, I just don't have the confidence.
And that self-blame is so powerful. But the sources argue it's almost always misplaced. I mean, what we have here isn't a failure of effort, right? Or intelligence. It's a failure of direction. This whole process, it has this inherent discomfort. And a lot of learners, I think understandably, avoid the one thing that really forces them to progress.
That's the core insight. You might be working incredibly hard. 10, 15 hours a week. But if all that effort is pointed in the wrong direction, you're basically just stretching your fluency timeline out forever. So our mission here is to really clarify that specific behavioral shift you need to make.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into the first major trap, which the source material calls the illusion of progress.
This one is so insidious because it feels really productive.
Yeah, it feels good.
It feels good and it feels safe. So, learners can feel busy and effective for years just by doing these sort of low-stakes activities, attending classes, watching video lessons, reading books.
Flashcards, apps.
All of it. And this activity absolutely feels like forward momentum.
And it is forward momentum, right? For input and knowledge acquisition. But where do the sources draw the line? At what point does just accumulating more knowledge stop being the main thing?
The line is drawn at activation.
Activation.
Yeah. Fluency isn't just knowing. Fluency is the rapid, automatic application of what you know. You can keep accumulating knowledge forever, but the sources are definitive on this. Fluency comes from using English in real time.
Under pressure.
Under pressure, in an unscripted context. So if you just study forever, you're successfully avoiding the one thing that actually builds the skill of fluency, and that's speaking.
So that brings us to mistake number 1. Studying more than speaking. But let's really break down the imbalance here, because it's massive.
Oh, it's huge. Think about a typical schedule. A learner might spend, 5 hours a week poring over grammar rules, perfecting tenses, decoding texts. But their speaking schedule, it's totally different. It's rare, it's careful, and they only try it when they feel completely ready.
Or when they're forced to, like in a classroom.
Exactly. And that ratio is where all the progress just stalls out. I mean, the source is really blunt about this. The brain learns fluency from output, not input.
Right. Input builds the library. Output builds the muscle to use it.
That's a perfect way to put it. Output builds the motor skills, the automatic pathways to access that library quickly. So if speaking is this rare, terrifying event, your timeline for fluency is just going to stretch and stretch no matter how much you study.
That's the critical piece then. The time you spend consuming prepares you, but the time you spend producing, that is the training.
That's a fluency training. Yeah. If you look at people with high fluency, their ratio flips at some point. They stop spending 80% of their time reading and listening, and they start spending 80% of their time just communicating, even if it's messy.
That makes perfect sense. We have to flip that ratio. But that leads us straight into the internal roadblocks, doesn't it? Because flipping that ratio means accepting massive discomfort.
It does.
So let's shift to those mental and habitual traps that just freeze progress, even for people who kind of know they should be speaking more.
And this internal freeze, it almost always stems from this belief we call mistake number 2, waiting to feel ready. Yes.
This is the learner's foundational but totally flawed belief system. My English isn't good enough yet. I'll speak. I'll speak when it improves.
It's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? We're waiting for the result before we take the action that actually causes the result.
It's a classic case of backwards thinking, and it's rooted in, a very understandable anxiety. But the essential rebuttal here is that your English improves because you speak.
Right.
Readiness doesn't come first. Action creates readiness. If you set this condition that you have to feel comfortable or confident or grammatically perfect before you speak, you're just guaranteeing that your timeline stretches out endlessly, because those feelings only come from the act of speaking itself.
And speaking of anxiety, waiting is almost always fueled by fear, which brings us to mistake number 3, fear-based learning.
And what's fascinating here is just how pervasive this is. Learners are they're overwhelmingly focused on avoiding 3 things. Making mistakes, receiving judgment from other people, and that awful feeling of embarrassment when you stumble, which leads directly to avoidance. I mean, if I avoid the conversation, I avoid the mistake. Psychologically, that's just self-protection. It makes perfect sense.
It feels safe. Absolutely. Avoidance gives you this immediate relief from discomfort. And the material really hammers this home. That feeling of safety comes at a crippling cost. It completely freezes the neurological wiring you need for rapid output.
And fear doesn't just go away with time, does it? Or with more study?
No, not at all. The sources are so clear on this. Fear only disappears with safe repetition. You have to practice in the face of the fear until your brain learns that stumbling or making a mistake isn't actually a threat. That's how you build the new, stronger pathways.
Okay, so we've tackled the internal freeze. But even for those who manage to push past the fear and try to speak, they often get bogged down by this mechanical habit. And that's mistake number 4, translation dependency.
This is maybe the single biggest source of slow, hesitant speech for intermediate learners. They have a really high input comprehension. They understand English when they hear it or read it. But when they want to produce it, they go through this 3-step mental process. Step 1, form a complex thought in their native language. Step 2, mentally convert that thought, phrase by phrase, into English. And then finally, step 3, they speak.
And you can hear that, can't you? When you're talking to someone doing that, there's that 3 or 4 second lag in the conversation. It's like their brain is loading on the dial-up connection, even though they have a high-speed library of vocabulary stored away.
That's a perfect analogy. That process of real-time translation, it just dramatically slows speech, it increases hesitation, and it often makes the speaker sound far less fluent than they actually are.
So what's the alternative?
Fluency requires training the brain to think simply and directly in English concepts. You have to bypass that native language translation step entirely. You need to train the brain to connect the English word directly to the idea, not to the word in your own language.
If we can train the brain to do that, we could cut out years of delay right there. Okay, let's pivot now to the last set of traps, the ones related to consumption and purpose.
Right. And this brings us to mistake number 5. Passive exposure without use. Look, consuming English content is critical. TV shows, music, reading, but this input is only really valuable if it serves as fuel for output.
So if I watch 10 hours of English documentaries a week, but I still only speak for 5 minutes, what have I actually done?
You've prepared your brain beautifully, but you haven't trained it. The source material draws this key distinction between preparation and training. If English stays mainly in your ears and it never reaches your mouth, that knowledge just stays passive. And fluency is delayed. Listening prepares the brain. It builds familiarity, pattern recognition, but speaking trains the muscles and the rapid recall mechanism.
Preparation versus training. That's a great distinction. And finally, we come back to this idea of direction, but this time it's focused on the target itself. Mistake number 6, no clear fluency goal.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, a lot of long-term learners just say, I want to be fluent, and they leave it there.
Right, it's too vague.
It's way too vague. They haven't defined what that even means for their actual life. Is the goal daily conversational fluency for, travel and small talk? Is it technical, professional communication for client meetings? Or is it passing a specific exam?
And those 3 targets require completely different types of vocabulary and grammar. I mean, if I'm studying for a business meeting, I probably shouldn't be spending hours on words for gardening tools.
Precisely. Without a clear, practical target, your practice stays wildly unfocused. You might be studying advanced academic words when all you really need is to confidently navigate a social event. Unfocused practice is it's a fundamental waste of time because you're applying all this effort without any precision.
Okay, so we've just laid out 6 distinct years-long traps. The wrong ratio, the avoidance translation, passive input, a fuzzy goal. I mean, it can sound pretty overwhelming, especially if you realize you've been caught in, 4 or 5 of them for years.
It can.
But the source material is actually really hopeful here because all those years of study were absolutely not wasted.
No, not at all. That time created this massive foundational reservoir of knowledge. You built the vocabulary, you have the understanding, you have familiarity with the language's structure. That knowledge is stored. It's in there.
It's all stored up. It's like a massive battery that's been charging for years, just waiting for the right switch to be flipped. Missing was the activation.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The sources detail this phenomenon of rapid improvement. Someone studies for years, they're plateaued at this frustrating intermediate level, and then suddenly, in 3 to 6 months, their fluency just skyrockets.
It's like they just got smarter all of a sudden. Or found some magic app.
But it was neither of those things. That rapid improvement wasn't because of increased intelligence or a stroke of luck. It was due entirely to a change in behavior.
Okay.
They started speaking daily. They developed habits to confront their fear. They sought out active exposure. And crucially, they embraced this kind of radical imperfectionism. When those habits change, that vast reservoir of knowledge finally gets used, and the timeline just shrinks drastically.
That is such a powerful idea. The knowledge was there the whole time. The bottleneck was just behavioral. So for the listener who's feeling stuck right now, who has put in years of work, the source gives this one critical diagnostic tool, one turning point question that just cuts right to the heart of it.
Yes. And the answer to this question, though it can be a bit painful, is the key to unlocking everything else. The question you have to ask yourself is, how often do I actually speak English?
And we have to stress, not study, not read, not listen.
But speak. If you are stuck after years of effort, the answer to that one question explains the entire delay.
So if the answer is rarely, or only in my class, or never for more than 5 minutes, then you know exactly which habit is stretching out your timeline. That's the metric that matters most.
And this is where we have to move from just analyzing this to actually applying it.
So to bring this all home, and to give you, the listener, a framework to stop stretching that timeline starting today, the source material distills this behavioral shift into 4 practical mandates.
These are the pillars of activation. They're designed to force you to use the knowledge you already have.
First, speak daily, not weekly, not monthly, daily. This could be short, just describing your morning routine out loud to yourself for 2 minutes. The goal is frequency, not perfection.
Second, Speak imperfectly. This means you have to embrace the mistakes as the actual way you learn. Don't wait to get the grammar perfect. If you can get 80% of your message across with short, simple, even choppy sentences, that's a huge win. Perfectionism is the enemy here.
Third, speak simply. Remember that translation trap. To break it, you have to intentionally simplify your thoughts. If you'd normally think a complex sentence in your native language, just practice expressing the core idea in basic English phrases. Train your brain to use English concepts, not translated thoughts.
And finally, speak without permission. Stop waiting for a teacher to call on you, or for the perfect trip, or for a friendly English speaker to just magically appear. You have to create the opportunity yourself. Find a language partner online, join a casual group, even just practice self-talk in the shower. Make speaking mandatory, not optional.
And that's the entire synthesis for the learner who feels stuck. You don't need more English knowledge. You need more English use.
So if you've studied for years and you feel stuck at that frustrating plateau, just take heart. You didn't fail at learning a language. You just weren't shown how fluency, which is all about intentional, active, imperfect communication, how it actually works.
So what does this all mean? The biggest takeaway here is a truth to hold on to, a kind of maxim that should guide every moment of your future practice. This is the difference between perpetual study and genuine fluency.
Years don't create fluency, habits do.
Change the habit today. Stop waiting for readiness and go activate the huge reservoir of knowledge you already have. Start speaking. We'll see you next time for the next deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you share with us, the research, the articles, all of it, and we distill it down into something you can actually use.
And today, we're looking at a huge stack of sources on a goal that is, well, incredibly common: achieving comfortable fluency in English.
Right, and our mission for you, the learner, is to really change how you think about your timeline to get there. We're calling this one the architecture of daily fluency.
Because it's all about this kind of radical idea. The key to speaking comfortably and shortening that path isn't about more motivation or being smarter or even some expensive course.
It's something much, much smaller.
Exactly. Much easier and way more consistent.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Because the common belief, and we saw this everywhere in the sources, is that fluency demands this massive, almost painful effort. People think they need these huge actions, 3-hour study sessions on a Saturday, or just endless grammar drills.
And that intense effort-first approach is the core misconception we really need to dismantle today. The sources are so clear on this.
That it's just not how it works.
It's not. Fluency doesn't grow from these overwhelming, sporadic bursts of effort. It grows from these small, repeatable behaviors, quiet, low-stress things that your brain can actually accept without fighting back.
So it's about avoiding that resistance.
That shift from effort to ease is what genuinely changes whether fluency takes years or just a few months.
Okay, I think this is where we need to get into the mechanics of it. We're not saying be lazy, right? We're talking about being efficient with how the brain actually works.
Yes.
So if my goal is to physically rewire my brain to speak English automatically, why does it prefer small and comfortable over, a huge effort?
It comes down to a really fundamental principle of neuroplasticity. Your brain doesn't change because you try really, really hard on one Tuesday. It changes because you repeat something so often that the behavior stops being an effort and it just becomes normal. We're basically moving the language from the front of your brain, the effortful part, into the automatic, habit-driven systems in the back. And normalcy, which comes from that gentle consistency, is the real accelerator.
That makes that one stark contrast to the sources just incredibly clear. The idea that 20 minutes every single day just absolutely beats 3 hours once a week.
It beats it every time. That 3-hour session is like a shock to the system. It's intense, it's stressful, and then it's followed by a week of silence.
So the brain has to start over each time.
It has to rebuild the connections.
Yeah.
The 20 minutes, though, that's a continuous, gentle signal. It's like putting better insulation around the wires in your brain. The signal gets faster, more automatic. Consistency just rewires faster than intensity, period.
So based on that reality, we can kind of define the rules for success here. The sources talk about this habit equation that dictates how fast you get fluent. What are the variables?
There are 3, and they're simple: frequency, comfort, and continuation. Frequency means daily contact, even if it's super brief. Comfort means the practice has to be psychologically safe, not stressful.
And continuation.
That's about prioritizing the flow of your ideas over stopping to be grammatically perfect. And the research is really strong here. If you compromise on even one of these, your timeline immediately stretches out.
From months to years.
You stop building momentum, you're just fighting inertia over and over again.
That roadmap gives us 4, I think, really foundational habits to build. Let's start with the first one, frequency, which you're saying translates to habit 1, daily contact.
Right, because we all hear it, oh, I'll study English this weekend when I have more time.
And that's the killer.
That's the problem. Your brain needs daily contact, not weekly. When you skip a few days, your brain starts to file English away as this inert foreign data, something it doesn't need for daily survival.
It resets.
It totally resets. So when you come back to it, you're just wasting time reactivating old connections instead of building new ones. The sources say the bare minimum to stop that slide is just 10 to 15 minutes a day.
So 10 minutes is just enough to keep the engine idling, stop the battery from dying.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, now for the hard one. Habit 2, speaking every day.
Yeah.
This is where the fear comes in, right? Because speaking feels like a performance.
It's the one habit almost every learner avoids. They think speaking every day means they have to find a native speaker or book a tutor for an hour.
Which is a huge barrier.
It's an administrative nightmare. It's so much friction. But what you actually need is just a daily release. The goal isn't a long conversation. It's just making the physical act of speaking automatic. The crucial metric here is surprisingly low.
How low?
1 minute, one idea, one thought spoken out loud is enough to maintain that forward momentum. That's what moves the timeline.
And that leads right into habit 3, which is about making that daily release survivable. Comfort over perfection. Because if you do speak for 1 minute today, but it felt awful and embarrassing, you're definitely going to find an excuse not to do it tomorrow.
Absolutely. We have to understand the brain's resistance. Habits only stick if they feel safe. Easy. If your daily English habit triggers anxiety, that feeling of being judged, even by yourself, avoidance is guaranteed.
How do we actually define comfortable practice? I mean, speaking a new language is inherently kind of stressful.
We define it by removing the 3 big stressors. The sources are very clear on this. For practice to be comfortable and effective, 3 conditions have to be met.
Okay.
First, mistakes have to be allowed. You have to see them as data, not as a failure. Second, the pace has to be slow. Rushing activates anxiety.
And the third.
And this is the most critical. Judgment has to be removed. If you're constantly judging your accent or your grammar, you are actively training the fear circuit in your brain.
Wait, I have to challenge that a little bit because traditional learning is all about correction, right? If I'm just focused on comfort and I keep making the same mistake, aren't I just hardwiring a bad habit?
That is such an important question, and the sources go right at it. This is where that third variable, continuation or habit 4, comes in.
Yeah.
The problem isn't making the error. The problem is stopping to correct it. When you're mid-sentence and you pause to fixate on a grammar mistake, you're teaching your brain that speaking is dangerous.
That it requires this fearful, precise control.
Yes, the negative training effect. That pause trains fear and paralysis, but continuation, just pushing through the air to finish your thought, that trains flow.
Okay. Flow over fear.
And the confidence you gain from training flow far outweighs the temporary mistake. You can clean up errors later in a separate study session. But in the moment of speaking, the rule is simple. Finish the idea first.
Finishing the idea first. That's a powerful reframe. Okay, so the sources then introduce a single, super high-impact daily habit that basically combines all of this. Frequency, comfort, and continuation.
The pinnacle of the whole architecture.
What is this routine?
It's this simple. Speak English for 5 to 10 minutes every day, alone and without stopping.
5 to 10 minutes every day. And the alone part feels huge. That removes the audience, the social pressure.
It removes 90% of the resistance. No notes, no checking your phone for grammar, no pressure. You're just practicing the internal mechanics of turning thoughts into words.
So what do you even talk about?
Anything. How you're going to make your coffee, your plans for the afternoon. Just describe the color of the wall. It doesn't matter.
But what happens when you get stuck? You forget a word, you hit a wall. The instinct is to stop and look it up.
And that is the crucial moment. You have to choose continuation. If you forget a word, you have to train yourself to talk around it. Paraphrase. Use the words you know to describe the one you forgot. If you mess up a verb tense, you just keep going.
Because the goal isn't accuracy in that moment.
The goal is uninterrupted flow. That single commitment to comfortable, uninterrupted speaking bypasses the fear center. And honestly, it often builds fluency faster than years of traditional classes.
Which makes perfect sense from a behavioral science perspective. Big plans fail because they just demand too much willpower.
And willpower is finite. We're designed to conserve energy. A big, difficult plan triggers immediate resistance. If a habit requires a 5-minute argument with yourself just to start, it's going to fail.
So small habits work because they don't trigger that fight.
Exactly. We have to recognize what the brain prefers. Familiar, easy, repeatable actions. It's all about lowering the friction to just get started.
And once that small habit, like 7 minutes of talking to yourself, becomes automatic,
then progress just accelerates. You're not spending energy fighting yourself anymore. English stops feeling so foreign. It starts to feel integrated. And that is when momentum really takes over. Time starts working for you, not against you.
But let's be realistic. Life happens. What happens when you miss a day? Is all that momentum just gone?
Missing one day is not the problem. It's the pattern of frequently skipping days that's the killer. The brain never gets a chance to stabilize English as a normal, necessary function.
So if the pattern is always broken, it just seems optional.
The brain gets the signal that this is intermittent. And each time you restart, it feels like you're beginning again. It costs energy, it erodes your confidence. Consistency is the shield that protects your momentum.
So let's make this super practical. How do we make sure these small habits actually stick? What's the low friction strategy?
We use something called habit stacking. It's all about removing the decision-making friction. You attach the small English habit to a really strong anchor, something you already do every single day without thinking.
Like attaching a new small boxcar to a huge train that's already moving.
That's a perfect analogy. You find an anchor. It could be right after breakfast, during your walk, or before you turn on the TV at night. You decide, immediately after I pour my coffee, I will do my 5 minutes of English flow. Or while the water is boiling for tea, I will describe the last movie I saw.
And that removes the decision.
No decision means no delay. The willpower fight is just gone.
So what does this all mean for the learner? We started this by talking about the timeline. If you actually implement this architecture, frequency, comfort, continuation, what is the real takeaway on that timeline shift?
The timeline just shrinks, naturally and dramatically, not because you rushed or stressed yourself out, but because you finally stopped fighting your own brain.
When the habits are designed to be automatic, progress is just inevitable.
Exactly. The language moves into your life with almost zero resistance.
That is such a relieving way to think about it, that fluency doesn't have to be this dramatic, painful effort.
The one truth to really hold on to is this. Fluency doesn't come from dramatic, intense efforts. It emerges from quiet, daily habits that your brain learns to trust instead of fear.
A true foundational mind shift. And here's my final thought for you, the learner, to think about. If 5 to 10 minutes of comfortable, non-judgmental continuation can accelerate something as complex as language fluency so dramatically, what other complex skill, whether it's coding or writing or a musical instrument, are you trying to master through big, stressful efforts, when the real solution might just be 5 minutes of comfortable daily flow? Something to think about until the next deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling what is probably one of the most stressful but also most fundamental questions for anyone trying to master English. How long does it really take to move past the textbook and, achieve that practical, real-life fluency?
And that's really the key distinction we need to make right now, isn't it? I mean, most learners, they track their progress with academic stuff.
Right, like exam scores, grammar tests.
Exactly. Exam scores, getting every grammar point perfect, building huge vocabulary lists. But the second they step into a real job interview or a tough office meeting,
or even just a fast-paced conversation,
it all just seems to vanish. That practice language is gone.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to just cut through all that noise. We've gone through a ton of sources to basically give you a clear, grounded roadmap for building real confidence. We're going to define fluency not as like one single finish line, but as 3 distinct milestones.
The timelines.
With timelines, yeah. Moving from, a low-stakes chat all the way up to high-stakes professional communication.
And that framework is so important because fluency is profoundly situational.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the linguistic toolkit you need to, say, talk about your favorite movie is just vastly different from the precise formal language you need to give an unexpected update to your boss.
Okay, I see.
Each environment demands a different level of clarity, of speed, of emotional control, and this is the critical part. Each requires a different amount of dedicated time and exposure.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start at the ground floor with that first and I think most common goal. Milestone 1.
Fluency in daily conversations.
Exactly.
This is the foundation of your social life, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about ordering food, asking for directions, having a casual chat.
Expressing simple opinions, that kind of thing.
Just handling those daily routines. It's a low-stakes environment where the main goal is just effective communication, not, dramatical elegance.
And based on what we've seen across all these sources, looking at thousands of learners getting to that point comfortable daily fluency, it takes dedicated daily speaking practice and usually lands somewhere around 3 to 6 months.
And what's really fascinating is what that daily fluency feels like on a cognitive level.
It's not about being perfect, right?
Not at all. It's about reducing that cognitive load. You've moved from consciously thinking about grammar rules
to just speaking.
Exactly. To letting the language operate almost automatically. So you don't freeze up when someone speaks to you. You can get your ideas out simply, respond naturally.
And you still have enough mental energy left over to actually follow the conversation.
Yes, that's the key. Yeah.
And the biggest challenge here, which the sources point to again and again, is what we're calling the recognition gap.
Oh, this is a huge one.
Learners hit that 3 to 6 month mark. They can handle daily life, they can have a casual chat, but they completely fail to see it as a massive achievement.
Right, because they're still mentally stuck on this ideal of perfection, this native speaker sound. They totally overlook the milestone of just being effective. Look, if you can communicate your basic needs, handle simple social stuff, and crucially, keep an interaction going without feeling totally exhausted, you have achieved daily fluency. You just need to acknowledge it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're still mentally translating everything back to your native language before you speak, you're not quite there yet.
Not yet.
But when you start just reacting in English without that internal switch, that's the sign. That's when you know you've crossed the line.
Precisely. That automaticity is the marker.
So once you've nailed that morning coffee chat, the next big hurdle usually comes around 9 o'clock on a Monday morning.
Office English.
Yes.
Moving up the pressure scale to milestone 2.
And this is where we shift gears completely. Now we're dealing with much higher stakes communication.
Oh, what specifically? Things like structured discussions, collaborated on a complex project, giving detailed updates to your manager, explaining a technical task. The expectation just changes from, did I get my point across, to, was I perfectly clear?
And the timeline definitely shifts for that. Office fluency, so the ability to handle meetings and professional talk without, that intense stress, that usually requires about 6 to 9 months.
And that's with consistent exposure inside that professional world.
Right.
You might ask, well, why is it only another 3 months, but the stakes feel so much higher?
Yeah, what's the reason?
The answer is precision and jargon. In a casual chat, you can say, I need that thing finished soon, and it's fine. In the office, you have to say, I need the Q3 deliverable signed off by EOD Tuesday. The room for ambiguity it shrinks to zero.
And the pressure isn't just about the information, is it? It's about projecting competence. You need to use that specific corporate dialect. I mean, think about the difference between explaining your weekend and explaining why a budget spreadsheet is off by 15%. That requires a whole different level of practice.
Absolutely. So what are the signs that you've hit that office fluency level? Again, it's about your behavior.
Okay.
It means you can share those updates calmly.
Yeah.
You understand multi-step instructions without needing someone to repeat them over and over.
Yeah.
You get the nuance.
And you can confidently ask questions in a meeting without that feeling of panic setting in.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have the mental space to focus on the actual content, not just scanning your own sentences for grammar mistakes.
I think one of the most liberating ideas from the sources here is that you don't have to be totally spontaneous to be fluent in this context.
No, not at all. We hold ourselves to this ridiculous standard
of just instantly knowing what to say.
You nailed it. Preparation is professional. I mean, if you were giving a big presentation in your native language, you would rehearse it.
Right.
So if you need to practice a key update before walking into a meeting, that is not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of being a good professional. Your goal is to be effective, not to be a walking dictionary.
So if you're at that 6 to 9 month point, the advice is basically prepare 3 bullet points before every meeting. Practice them out loud.
Exactly. That kind of simulation dramatically cuts down the time you need to adapt.
Okay, so let's get to the final and often the most terrifying stage. Milestone 3.
Interviews. and other high-pressure, high-judgment situations. The jump to the interview stage it's a unique psychological barrier. An interview is the ultimate stress test. It combines maximum pressure, direct judgment about your future.
And a ticking clock. A very strict time limit to come up with these complex, polished answers.
Right. And the sources show that interview fluency, that ability to perform smoothly under that kind of pressure, that often takes 9 to 12 months of really dedicated, specific scenario-based practice.
Okay, but why so much longer?
Here's the crucial insight. It's not really because the vocabulary is that much more complicated than in the office. The biggest hurdle is that the fear is amplified. When you're being judged on your potential, the emotional stakes they're through the roof. The skill you're building here is less about vocabulary and much, much more about mental control, about managing that performance anxiety.
So what we're really testing is resilience, not just your word bank. Is that fair?
Completely fair. We're testing your ability to recover. Can you stay composed when you stumble? Can you buy yourself time gracefully when a tough question catches you off guard?
And what does that look like, that resilience, when it actually comes out in an interview?
When you reach this level, you can answer complex behavioral questions clearly. You can structure your responses, maybe using a framework like STAR.
Situation, task, action, result.
Even when you're nervous. And crucially, you know how to recover when you get stuck, instead of just a long, silent, awkward pause.
You have a strategy.
You use a functional phrase like, "That's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment." It buys your brain the seconds it needs to formulate a good answer.
That distinction is so important. In the office, if you misspeak, a colleague might help you out. In an interview, every little stumble feels like it's part of your final grade.
Exactly. You have to be your own editor in real time under a very hostile clock.
This brings us to what might be the most common problem for learners, that real-life gap. The person who's been practicing for 6 months and just thinks, why does my practice fluency disappear when I actually need it?
This is when we hear, "I speak fine when I'm alone, but I freeze up with real people." And it's not a failure, it's just an underestimation of what a real interaction demands from your brain.
So what does a real situation add that, say, practicing in front of a mirror doesn't?
Real situations bring in 3 things that are impossible to simulate alone. First is unpredictability. The conversation never, ever follows your script. Second, you have to process the other person's immediate reactions. A raised eyebrow, an interruption, a follow-up question you didn't expect.
And the third?
Intense emotional pressure. Your brain is suddenly doing 2 jobs: language production and anxiety management. It needs repeated exposure to real situations to learn how to handle both at the same time.
It's like practicing a presentation perfectly in your room versus giving it when a senior manager interrupts you with a hostile question halfway through.
Yes. The moment that unpredictability hits, your brain defaults to its most basic function, which is often freezing up to manage the threat. And that's why your fluency seems to just evaporate.
The brain is busy with threat assessment instead of word recall.
Exactly. And this is why fluency is so contextual. If you feel fluent with your friends talking about your hobbies, but you struggle giving a formal report to the board,
That doesn't mean you're not fluent.
no. It just means you're still building fluency in that specific context of authority figures or in high-pressure settings. It just means that context needs more practice time.
You have the knowledge, you just lack the high-pressure application practice.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so let's pivot to strategies. If we accept these timelines, 3, 6, 9 months, what can we actually do to shorten that path?
The answer is always aggressive simulation. You have to actively try to replicate that real-life stress, but in a safe environment. First, practice speaking out loud, not just in your head. Second, simulate real situations. Role-play office scenarios with a partner. Record yourself answering common interview questions.
That recording part is so important. It forces you to actually confront how you sound under a little bit of pressure.
It does. But maybe the most practical strategy is graduated exposure. Don't jump from a casual chat straight to a formal presentation.
Start small.
Start small. A one-on-one update with a supportive colleague, then a small team meeting, and a larger group discussion. You slowly increase the pressure.
And the sources are all very clear, but the single biggest mistake that slows people down, the one pitfall everyone seems to fall into,
It's avoiding real situations until they feel ready.
waiting for that magic moment of readiness.
That delay is the enemy of practical fluency. Waiting until you feel ready adds months, sometimes years, to your timeline because you're waiting for confidence to show up first.
That's the wrong order.
It's the completely wrong order of operations. Confidence is not the ticket you need to get into the game. It is the trophy you get for playing the game.
So it's the result of exposure, not the prerequisite for it.
You have to be willing to be awkward, to make mistakes in public and learn to recover. The confidence only stabilizes after that. Readiness comes from experience, not just preparation.
You have to embrace the friction because that's the sign of growth.
Yes.
Okay, so let's wrap this up with a healthy expectation for you to set for yourself no matter which milestone you're aiming for.
The healthy expectation is this. You do not need to sound perfect to be effective. Perfection is a myth that keeps learners trapped.
Your goal isn't to get rid of your accent or eliminate every single tiny grammar mistake.
Not at all. If people understand you, if they respond to you normally, and if the communication achieves its goal, whether that's closing a deal or just ordering the right coffee, you are fluent in that situation.
Effectiveness is the only metric that matters in real life.
So what does all this mean for you, the learner? It means you should stop focusing on one giant, overwhelming goal called fluency. Instead, focus on the immediate context you're facing.
Acknowledge that real-life fluency doesn't just arrive everywhere at once, fully formed. It arrives one situation at a time.
First the casual chat, then navigating the office, and then finally mastering those high-stakes moments.
Yeah.
The fundamental truth to hold on to is that your goal is not to become a perfect English speaker. Your goal is to be effective in the very next situation you face. Master that context, and then you can move on to the next one. That is how you win the long game of real-world fluency. Okay, so let's unpack this. If you are serious about learning a language, you know the feeling, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You hit that wall, that plateau, you're doing all the work.
The flashcards, listening to conversations.
All of it. And then you just wake up one morning and think, am I actually getting any better? Is any of this, is this even working?
And that moment of doubt, that paralyzing feeling, that derails more learners than any tricky verb conjugation or, complex phrasal verb.
It makes the journey feel impossible.
It does, because you're flying blind. You're just guessing at your own progress. And worse, you're comparing yourself to every perfect Instagram polyglot you see.
And that guesswork, that constant comparison, that's really the number one source of that crippling doubt. So our mission for this deep dive is to get rid of that doubt. We're diving into some sources, specifically insights from the 90-Day Fluency Signals, to give you a really clear, honest, and completely personal way to check your progress. We're talking about a fundamental shift.
A huge shift. We're moving the whole idea of measurement away from these unreliable feelings and rooting it in something you can actually see. Observable, measurable, behavioral patterns.
But before we get to the fix, we have to talk about the hard truth of the problem, right?
Yeah.
Feeling fluent is it's a terrible metric. It's the worst possible way to measure.
It really is. I mean, think about it. Some days you wake up, you've had great sleep, you're energized, and you feel like you could debate philosophy and English, no problem.
Yeah.
Then the very next day, maybe you're stressed, you're tired, and suddenly you can barely order a coffee without, stumbling over the simplest words.
And that huge shift, that 180-degree turn in confidence, that does not mean your English skill went backwards 50% overnight.
No.
It just means your energy changed or your stress level shot up.
Exactly. Feelings go up and down like a roller coaster. They are the most unreliable narrators of your skill. But the actual skill, the language muscle you've built, that does not just vanish.
So to get off that roller coaster, we need to change the question we're asking ourselves.
This is the critical shift.
You have to stop asking that subjective, emotion-based question. Do I feel fluent yet? Or am I good enough?
And instead, you start asking this very objective, action-based question. What can I do now that I couldn't do before?
I love that.
Because skills and knowledge, they always show up in your behavior, in what you can do, not in some fleeting emotion. And that is the foundation for measuring real growth you can actually trust.
But tracking those little behavioral shifts, that can feel kind of daunting, right? Like, where do you even start?
Right. And that's where the sources we're analyzing, they highlight these very specific, highly observable changes, patterns, really.
Patterns that show up over a focused period, like 90 days.
Exactly. A focused 90-day period of consistent practice. And these are the signals that prove the work is paying off, even if you don't feel it yet.
Okay, so let's break them down. What's the very first real sign that things are starting to click?
We've identified 5 key signals, sort of like checkpoints. And the first one is reduced fear.
Okay, and let's be super clear on this. This doesn't mean all the nervousness just vanishes.
Not at all. That little flutter in your stomach is normal, especially in a high-stakes situation. But the crucial difference is that you no longer freeze.
Ah, the freeze. I know that feeling.
Yeah. Freezing is that mental wall that just stops communication before it even starts. When you hit this first signal, you start to think, okay, I might not know the perfect phrase here, but I know enough to try.
You just push the words out.
You push them out, even if they're a little clumsy. It's that shift from prioritizing perfection to prioritizing communication. That's the real sign of progress.
And that reduction in freezing. That seems like it would naturally lead to the second signal.
It leads to it beautifully. And this one is maybe even more telling about your actual control over the language. It's faster recovery.
See, I think a lot of learners believe progress means making fewer and fewer mistakes. But that's a trap, isn't it?
It's the biggest trap. Look, getting stuck, forgetting a word, it's normal. It happens in your native language. The sign of progress isn't avoiding that little snag. It's what happens in the 3 seconds right after.
So instead of just stopping dead in your tracks or apologizing,
You get stuck, but you don't stop. You know how to quickly rephrase. Maybe you use a simpler word or a gesture, something to work around the problem, and you keep the thought moving forward.
so recovery is actually more important than speed.
Far more important, because recovery shows you have control. You can navigate the gaps in your knowledge and keep the message alive. You're using the tools you have, not worrying about the ones you don't.
And when you can do that, when you can recover from those little bumps, something else starts happening naturally, right?
Yes, and that brings us to signal 3, longer speaking turns.
This one must feel so good to notice.
Oh, it's incredibly satisfying, because you'll suddenly realize, wow, I've been talking for like a full minute here without stopping, without needing someone to jump in and finish my sentence for me.
And it's not because you suddenly became perfect.
Not at all. It's because the ideas are just starting to flow. The energy you used to spend on anxiety and self-correction is now being used to actually generate content.
That makes so much sense.
Length shows comfort, and comfort is what really speeds up the whole learning timeline.
Okay, that sustained effort. It must signal a really powerful internal shift, which I think is signal 4. Less translation.
Yes. This is the holy grail for so many learners, that moment when English just comes out.
Without the buffer.
Exactly. For most people, the process starts with 3 steps. You think in your native language, you translate it to English, and then you speak. When translation starts to fade, you're bypassing that first step.
So you might still translate some complex ideas.
Of course, for, abstract concepts or technical terms, but it happens less. And crucially, some things just start coming out automatically. Answering the phone, giving a common opinion.
No intermediate step.
No intermediate step. That automation is powerful proof your brain is adapting. It's building a direct highway between the idea and the English word. That's a very strong signal.
So if that's the internal proof, what about the outside world? That brings us to signal 5.
Right. Signal 5 is the ultimate external proof. Normal reactions from listeners.
What does that look like?
It's when you know the communication is really, truly working. People you're talking to, they stop doing certain things. They stop slowing down their speech for you. They stop correcting every little mistake.
They stop asking you to repeat yourself all the time.
Precisely. Instead, they just respond. They respond to the content of your message, not the mechanics of how you said it. They're engaging with your idea or your joke.
They're just having a normal conversation with you.
That is the gold standard. That efficient two-way exchange. That is the real-world definition of fluency.
Okay, those 5 signals are a fantastic roadmap. But all of that progress can become totally invisible if a learner falls into what the sources call the comparison trap.
Oh, comparison absolutely destroys effective measurement. If you look at someone else and say, they got fluent in 6 months, why am I still struggling? You've just invalidated your entire journey.
Because you're ignoring all the context.
All of it. You have no idea what their starting line was. How much did they practice before they started counting? Do they speak for 3 hours a day or 30 minutes? How much fear did they have to overcome? What are their goals?
It's like comparing your marathon time to someone who started at the halfway mark.
It's meaningless data. And worse, when you do that, you steal your own motivation. It makes the real progress you're making, those 5 signals, feel like nothing.
So we need a better comparison.
The only valid comparison is you today versus you in the past.
Compare yourself to your past self.
That's the only metric that matters. Ask yourself, am I calmer now than I was last month? Can I explain this idea more clearly than I could last week? If the answer is yes, that's a real tangible win.
And to make that tracking easy, the source material has this wonderfully simple weekly check-in.
It's super simple. You don't need spreadsheets or anything complicated. Once a week, just 5 minutes, you ask yourself 3 questions about your behavior.
Okay, what are they?
Question 1, did I speak English this week? Just a yes or no.
Simple enough.
Question 2, did I finish my ideas more easily this week? Or did I feel a bit less reliant on others to help me?
And question 3.
Did fear reduce even slightly in just one interaction? Even a tiny moment of courage counts.
That's it.
That's it. And here's the green light, the most important part. If you can answer yes to even one of those questions, you are moving forward, period. You've made progress, regardless of how you felt.
That's brilliant because it focuses only on the behaviors that matter.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of feelings,
Yeah.
we should talk about this thing that happens to almost everyone, this pre-breakthrough slump.
Oh, this is so important. It's when you feel like you've stalled, or even that you're going backwards right before a huge leap forward.
That mental fog, the frustration.
It's critical to see that feeling not as failure, but as a sign that progress is happening under the surface. Your brain is busy, it's reorganizing and consolidating everything you've learned.
So it feels slow because the system is updating in the background.
That's a perfect analogy. The system feels sluggish, but when it reboots, it's going to be faster and more efficient. That silence, that struggle, that's your brain laying down those direct neural pathways. You have to trust the consolidation.
So if we bring this all together, what's the healthiest answer to that big question? How long does it take?
Well, it takes long enough to build comfort, but it's short enough to see real results, as long as you're measuring the right things, the behaviors, not the emotions.
And fluency isn't some big dramatic event, no fireworks.
No, it shows up quietly. It arrives when you stop asking if you're there yet and you just start communicating. When your focus shifts from the mechanics to the message, you're already there.
So the final thought from these sources, the thing to really take with you, is that if you're speaking more, if you're freezing less, and you're recovering when you make mistakes,
then you are already on the path. You're there. Time is no longer working against you. It's working for you. It's building that foundation.
So the challenge for you this week is just to observe.
Yeah.
Look for one of those 5 signals in your next conversation.
Just ask yourself, what's one single thing I can do today that I couldn't do last month? That right there, that's your progress.
If you've been listening to this episode and thinking, so, I'm not late, I'm not slow, I'm just learning, that realization matters more than any timeline. Because fluency isn't something you chase. It's something you build, quietly, day by day.
You don't need to rush. You don't need to compare yourself to anyone. And you definitely don't need to be perfect. You need patience, consistency, and the courage to keep using English even when it feels uncomfortable. That's how progress actually happens.
So here's your next step. Today, don't study English. Use it. Speak one idea. Respond once. Finish one thought in English. Even if it's simple. That single action moves you forward.
If this episode helped you see your journey more clearly, stay with us. Subscribe to English Speak Pulse, where we don't promise shortcuts. We build real communication, step by step.
And if you know someone who feels discouraged, who thinks they're too slow or too late, share this episode with them, because sometimes all a learner needs is the truth and a little patience.
Your English is growing, even on the days you can't see it. Trust the process. Stay consistent and keep going.